This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Connected Data, the makers of the Transporter and Transporter Sync. Your data in your own private cloud, safe, secure, and cost-effective. Save 10% off any transporter model, up to $35, using the code MV10, or get $20 off the Transporter Sync with the code MV20, both at filetransporterstore.com. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and MacVoices is in San Francisco for WWDC. We're at Jillian's at the AltConference, and I have the rare treat of sitting down face-to-face with Peter Cohen. Peter, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Chuck.
You're a lot bigger in person. I usually see you about this big on my screen.
And yes, now the hulking man mountain is next to you.
I like it. I like it. So Cape Cod to San Francisco just for WWDC.
Absolutely, yeah. Wouldn't miss it for the world.
That's good. So I lose track. Who are you writing for now?
imore.com.
Exclusively.
Well, I still do some, freelance stuff from time to time, but imore is 99% of what I do.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Well, they were lucky to get you.
Thank you very much.
No question about it.
I'm lucky to have them.
I would agree with that too. So the T-shirt says, "I was a Mac user when Apple was doomed." Is Apple doomed after yesterday?
Doomed, incredibly doomed. They're going to go out of business next week.
I knew it. Right before the stock split, too.
Yeah, exactly.
What was your take on everything? I mean, there was a lot, so that's a really general way to approach it, but what hit you as most important or most critical?
Well, continuity, I think, is probably the big thing that jumped out at me that I think is really a game changer for the way that people use everything that's got an Apple logo on it, Up until now, we've had our Macs, we've had our iOS devices, and there's been some limited connectivity between them thanks to, iCloud Sync and documents in the cloud and so on. But Apple's really pulling out all the stops, and they're making the sum of using Apple products greater than the individual parts. It's really kind of an exciting thing to see. So, if you've got your Mac and you're using your Mac, that's great. If you've got your iOS device and you're using that, that's great. But together, they're going to be able to do some amazing things that we haven't seen before.
The first thing that flashed through my mind when they were showing continuity was, why would I go anywhere else? Because that seems to be, and I know there's some things that other platforms have had, but if they can really pull that off the way it looks like they are aiming for, there's nobody that has anything like that.
Yeah, and it's really kind of interesting when you compare how Apple is doing this compared to, let's say, Microsoft's philosophy, right? Microsoft developed the Metro UI, and they've worked the Metro UI out to every product. So you've got the same user interface for your Surface tablet that you've got for your Windows Phone, that you've got for your PC laptop, and maybe the PC laptop is a hybrid laptop that can also act as a touch device, but the user experience is still very individualized. Apple, on the other hand, recognizes that that your user experience for each of those devices needs to remain unique. The way that you use your iPhone or your iPad is very different from the way that you use your Macintosh. But rather than just trying to blur the lines between them, Apple's obliterating them in a way that enables you to do things that you couldn't do before individually. And the case that they presented at the keynote yesterday was a great example of that, where, and this has happened to me a number of times, where I'll start writing an email response to somebody on my iPhone or my iPad, and I'll get about a sentence or two into it, and I'm like, this is frustrating. I'm going to go to the Mac and I'll do it. Well, up until now, I've had to do it all over again on the Mac.
Right.
Now I'm not going to have to do that. Now I can just use handoff, to go to the Mac and just keep going from where I was at before. What's the most exciting part about that, though, is it isn't unique to Apple products. It isn't unique to Apple applications. They're giving developers the tools that they need to make handoff work for their applications. So we're going to see a lot more integration.
Your comment about Microsoft strategy and Apple strategy, I think, is really interesting, because it's up till now, I feel like everybody's tried to do it the easy way. Okay, we're going to have this interface, and we're going to shrink it down for the iPhone, pump it up a little bit for the iPad, then have it full-blown and gorgeous on the Mac, or whatever. And Apple really hasn't taken that approach. Apple said, these are distinct devices, and they each need their own interface, but we're going to have common elements and common ways of doing things.
Right, and then iCloud Drive is the glue that sort of pulls everything together. One of the things I'm really excited about with iCloud Drive is that for a very long time, power users on iOS have been saying, you know, Apple, I need a file system. I need to be able to look at individual documents that I'm working on. And in fairness, up until now, the way that iOS has worked, and the way that it still does in iOS 7, is that each application has documents in its individual silo, but trying to get them to interoperate is really difficult. iCloud Drive is going to give people the ability to maybe draw something in one application and then color it in another, and then pull it into their presentation software with another. So save a full-blown file system. This answers the problem that people had, which is, how do I do more with the documents that I'm creating in these apps? It really is going to extend the usefulness of iOS 8 for a lot of people, I think.
And being here, neither one of us have had the chance to really read everything and read all the analysis, but I think...
Well, speak for yourself, Joe.
I know you didn't get any sleep last night, Peter, but come on. I'm not sure that really was the way it was couched, and so that's something people are going to have to learn about iCloud Drive. It made perfect sense, and good, I'm going to be able to access everything, but the fact that that is sort of the file system for iOS, or will be when it comes out.
Exactly. So this fall is going to be a very interesting time. Now, some people have noted that there were no hardware announcements at WWDC this year, and that's not unprecedented. This isn't the first time that WWDC hasn't had any hardware announcements. I think the most recent one that I can remember is 2011, when they introduced Lion and iOS 5, and iCloud for that matter. There were no hardware announcements at that show, but ultimately this is a developer conference, and what was really kind of nice about the keynote was that it was a keynote that was very oriented for developers. There was some consumer-facing information there, but this was really to get the people who are making the products, that the 130 million people who are new to the Apple platform, in the past 12 months are using, get more out of what they're doing.
Do you think that that the lack of announcements of hardware or some more consumer-oriented announcements were a missed opportunity?
No, I don't. And judging from what I've seen of Apple's stock price over the course of the past 24 hours, neither did Wall Street.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that was a major disappointment to anybody who actually mattered.
Yeah. Which, I guess, also... we continue the anticipation of what's next.
Yeah, indeed. It looks like the second half, and if I remember right, Eddie Q said this at the at Recode's conference last week, that the second half of the year is going to be heavy with Apple hardware announcements. So there's no question in my mind that we're going to see some great stuff come out of Apple, shiny new toys to play with later this year.
Yeah, let's hope so. Although my credit card doesn't hope so, but you know how that is.
No, yeah.
Any surprise with how much of the show was Craig Federighi? I mean, I thought he was brilliant. I thought he did a great job. He was approachable. He was humorous. He kept you engaged. But no Eddie Q. No
Phil Schiller.
No Phil Schiller. Yeah, there were so many people that weren't there afterwards that you thought about. It's like, wow, Dre made an appearance by phone. That was all. Jimmy Iovine didn't at all. So, was that a surprise?
No, not really. I mean, first of all, as far as Beats were concerned, that was a deal that was just announced. So I don't think that you can expect, Apple to acquire Beats and then Jimmy Iovine to be, couched on how to, present at an Apple event.
Good point.
And let's face it, these guys have been here for days before now, making sure that their presentation was tight. Craig, of course, got a promotion. He's no longer Air Force One. Now he's Superman, according to Tim.
Yeah, that's true. That was interesting.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time on stage.
He did, and yet he seemed very comfortable.
And that's the thing that I wanted to say. It amazed me how at ease everybody was at this particular event. I mean, there were a couple of presentations from some of the developers that were maybe a little bit stilted, a little uncomfortable, a little clearly canned.
Right.
But when it came to the meat of it, what the Apple execs were showing, they were very comfortable. They were very happy. They just really seemed to be in the zone this year.
Does Apple have a new rock star presenter?
In Craig? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. And the best part was he didn't try to be Steve Jobs. I mean, I'm sorry, folks, we're going back to that, but we have to a little bit because that's the measure that everybody goes by. And this just sort of broke that yardstick and threw it away. He's a new kind of presenter for Apple, but he's a spectacular presenter.
Absolutely. And Tim seemed a lot more at ease this time around than before as well. This is a lot of color commentary, inside baseball that, unless you really watch a lot of Apple events, you probably don't care about that much. But I think it speaks to them understanding that what they're doing is really important and that they have the target audience that they really wanted to talk to here.
Any hidden meaning or any analysis from you on why we saw a streamed keynote? And they did it last year, I know, but we also saw a streamed developer State of the Union. So a lot of this stuff was a lot more accessible. Is it just a matter of reaching more developers, or is it for some of us that would like to listen in and are really into this stuff?
I think Apple recognizes that there's a lot of just general public interest in what they're doing, at WWDC, and that certainly makes a difference. But the other thing that you've got to bear in mind is that 6,000 people here showed up, with tickets to WWDC, and they're all over at Moscone West across the street from where we are right now.
We're not.
Yeah. But Apple makes all of this content available to anybody who's a registered developer. They're streaming it as it happens. So it's to reach the outside of the 6,000 people who couldn't be at Moscone West this week. The hundreds of thousands of developers who are at home or in their hotel room nearby, or right here at AltConference. And trying to get the most out of that as well.
Yeah, there was standing room. Were you over there for the keynote?
No, I covered the keynote for iMore from the hotel room.
Okay.
Because I don't like to wear pants.
Okay. Happily, Jillian's requires pants. So.
Yeah, no shirt, no shoes, no service.
Yeah. No, but AltConference was packed. I mean, it was standing room only, and I think they actually had to have a spillover of some kind. So the interest is clearly here. And let's not overlook the fact that 6,000 developers on the other side of the street, they were the ones that won the lottery. There were a lot of high-profile developers that were at AltConference or maybe hanging out in their hotel rooms or didn't even make the trip.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think that you necessarily, unless you really need FaceTime with, no pun intended, FaceTime, with an Apple engineer to debug your code. Yeah. I don't necessarily think that there's an overwhelming reason for developers to actually go to WWDC proper, because there's so much stuff happening in San Francisco ancillary to WWDC, whether it's AltConference or whether it's the social events that are happening, the networking stuff, the mixers, the parties that are happening. There's a lot for developers who happen to be in the Bay Area or feel like they can justify the trip to come in and enjoy and still get a lot out of.
And I still like the one-to-one communication. I've met some amazing developers here this week that we'll be talking to in future months about their projects. But yeah, it's an interesting mix, but there's still a lot of value to coming and being here, even if you don't get the magic ticket. You go to the parties, and we all joke about that, but a lot of connections get made at parties.
It's true. And if nothing else, it's good to be, with people who are using the same products that you do, using the same services that you do, but have a very different perspective on it.
Yeah.
That they're bringing their own experience to it, and the developers who are here have their own customers who are bringing that to the table as well.
Yeah. Peter, I know you're busy. Thanks so much for the time. It's great to see you live and in person.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Chuck.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. You heard it here first. Apple is not doomed, from Peter Cohen. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.